Ima had known hunger for as long as she could remember. Born into a world that had nothing to offer her, she spent her days in the dusty streets of Nsukka, watching the wealthy pass by in their embroidered wrappers and heavy beads. She envied them, not just for their riches, but for the ease with which they carried themselves, untouched by the despair that clung to her like a second skin. Her mother, a weary woman with hollow cheeks, always warned her that the gods had their ways of keeping balance. Do not envy the wealthy, Ima. Their riches come with burdens you cannot bear. But Ima did not listen. She was tired of suffering. She wanted more, needed more. One fateful evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, she met the priestess. The old woman sat by a shrine deep in the forest, her presence both terrifying and magnetic. Ima, drawn by something beyond her understanding, approached hesitantly. "You seek wealth, child?" the priestess murmured, her voice ancient and knowing. "Yes," Ima whispered, her heart hammering. The priestess studied her before retrieving a set of waist beads from her pouch. "Wear these always. Any man who lays with you will transfer his fortune to you. But remember, never remove them." Armed with her newfound power, Ima left Nsukka behind and journeyed to Enugu, the city of wealth and opportunity. Her transformation was immediate. The moment she stepped into the town, people turned to stare. She was beautiful before, but now she was otherworldly. Her curves more pronounced, her dark skin glowing like polished ebony, her afro framing her face like a queen's crown. She wore the beads proudly, letting them peek through the folds of her wrapper, knowing their magic would soon set her above everyone else. The first to fall was a wealthy palm oil trader. He met her in the market, enchanted by the sway of her hips, the gleam in her eyes. He pursued her, desperate to claim her, and when he finally did, his fortune vanished overnight. His business crumbled, his wealth disappeared, and his health deteriorated. But Ima thrived. She bought a small house in the heart of the city, dressing herself in the finest fabrics, adorning her body with gold and coral beads. She had tasted wealth, and she wanted more. Word of Ima spread like wildfire. Men whispered about her in hushed tones, warning each other of her allure. But desire is a dangerous thing. It blinds men, deafens them to reason. Despite the rumors, they sought her out, eager to possess the woman who seemed to defy nature itself. Nobles, warriors, even a king, one by one they all fell, their riches flowing into Ima's hands as they lost everything. She became a legend, an untouchable beauty that only the foolish dared to chase. She moved through the city like a goddess, head held high, her laughter echoing through the streets like a melody. Women envied her, men worshipped her. But none of them knew the truth, that every night, when she lay alone in her luxurious home, she felt the weight of something dark pressing against her soul. The priestess's words echoed in her mind. Never remove them. A simple rule, yet one that bound her to something far more sinister than she could understand. When King Obiora of Enugu first saw Ima, he knew he had to have her. He was a powerful ruler, feared and respected, and he had never been denied anything. He sent his guards to summon her, but she refused, smiling sweetly as she declined his invitation. This only fueled his obsession. He sent gifts, gold, silk, rare jewels, but Ima remained elusive. She knew what was to come. The powerful always believed they could control everything, even fate itself. One evening, he arrived at her home himself, a man unaccustomed to pleading. "You will be my queen," he declared, eyes dark with desire. Ima tilted her head, considering him. A king's wealth was immeasurable, his power unrivaled. She allowed him to touch her, knowing that by morning his throne would crumble. And it did. The moment he took her, his kingdom fell into chaos. His allies turned against him, his people revolted. By the end of the week, he was stripped of his title, left wandering the streets a broken man. Meanwhile, Ima adorned herself with his stolen riches, draping herself in the remnants of his once mighty rule. But the emptiness in her heart only grew, an unshakable shadow that whispered of things yet to come. Nonso had watched Ima for months. Unlike the others, he did not chase after her, did not succumb to her allure. He studied her, waiting, planning. He had seen the destruction she left behind, the way powerful men crumbled in her wake. He knew she was not of this world, that she carried something cursed, and he had made up his mind. He would stop her. One night he followed her to a quiet grove just outside the city. Ima sensed him before she saw him, her heart quickening in her chest. "You are different," she mused, turning to face him. "Why do you not desire me?" Nonso smiled, stepping closer. "Oh, I do, but I know your secret, and I know your weakness." For the first time in her life, Ima felt fear. Nonso was patient. He did not make a move right away, instead allowing Ima to stew in her fear. He watched as she carried herself with false confidence, her beauty a mask for the storm brewing within her. Ima had never encountered a man like him, one who did not fall at her feet, one who did not crumble beneath her spell. It unnerved her. He began appearing wherever she went, his presence an unshakable shadow. She found him sitting in the market as she passed by, his dark eyes locked onto hers. He stood at the entrance of the palace she had taken over, never speaking, just watching. He followed her to the shrines where she secretly sought answers, making himself known only when she thought she was alone. "You cannot run forever, Ima," he finally said one evening, stepping into her path. She stood frozen, the weight of his words settling over her like a curse. "The gods are watching. They will not let this continue." For the first time since she had put on the waist beads, Ima felt the stirrings of doubt. Had she truly escaped poverty, or had she simply walked into another kind of prison? Ima could no longer ignore Nonso's presence. He was unlike any man she had ever encountered. He did not chase her with desperation, or shower her with gifts. Instead, he studied her, waited for her to make a mistake. His patience unnerved her. No matter where she went, she felt his gaze following her, a silent reminder that she was being hunted. Her confidence began to crack. She no longer paraded through the streets with the same arrogance. She avoided the markets, the shrines, the palace gates. At night, she woke up in a cold sweat, hearing his voice in her dreams. "The gods are watching." The words clung to her like a curse. Desperate, she sought out the priestess. The old woman's hut was buried deep within the forest, far from prying eyes. "You did not tell me there would be someone like him," Ima hissed, pacing the dimly lit room. The priestess regarded her with knowing eyes. "You are powerful, but power alone is not enough. He is not a man blinded by lust. He is a man driven by purpose, and that makes him dangerous." Ima clenched her fists. "Then how do I stop him?" The priestess stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "There is only one way. He must become yours, or he must be destroyed." Ima had seduced kings and warriors, but Nonso was different. He did not falter under her gaze, did not reach for her the way others did. Still, she knew men, she knew their weaknesses. If he would not fall willingly, she would make him. She found him one evening, standing at the edge of the market. She approached slowly, letting her wrapper slip just enough to reveal the golden beads at her waist. "Why do you follow me, Nonso?" she asked, her voice a melody in the wind. "If you do not desire me, what do you want?" Nonso tilted his head, his dark eyes unwavering. "I want to know what happens when you no longer wear those beads." For the first time, Ima felt true panic. She forced a laugh, stepping closer. "You speak as though I would ever take them off." Nonso did not smile. "Everything that is given comes with a price, Ima. Do you even know what yours is?" His words were a challenge, a test of her resolve. She could feel the weight of them pressing against her chest, but she would not let him win. Not yet. She reached for his hand, pressing it against her waist. "Touch me, and you will understand why no man can resist me." Nonso did not pull away. Instead, he leaned in, his lips a breath away from hers. "You misunderstand me, Ima. I am not here to fall for you. I am here to free you." A shiver ran down her spine. For the first time, she wondered if she had met a man who could truly undo her. Ima could not shake Nonso's words. "I am not here to fall for you. I am here to free you." They echoed in her mind, weaving through her thoughts like an inescapable curse. She had built her life on power, on the knowledge that no man could resist her. But Nonso was not like the others. He did not fear her. He did not desire her. He sought something deeper, something dangerous. She spent the next few days trying to avoid him, but she felt his presence everywhere. He did not chase, did not force, did not demand. He waited. It unnerved her. She was the predator, the goddess who bent men to her will, and yet, with him, she felt something she had never known before: doubt. One night, unable to ignore the pull any longer, she returned to the forest, standing before the priestess once more. "He is different," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know how to make him fall." The priestess studied her carefully, then let out a low, knowing laugh. "You are mistaken, child. He is already falling, but not in the way you desire." Ima frowned. "Then what must I do?" The priestess stepped forward, tracing a line down Ima's arm. "You must make a choice. Either claim him completely, or rid yourself of him forever. If you hesitate, he will be your undoing." Ima swallowed hard. She had never hesitated before. But now, for the first time, she was afraid of the path ahead. Determined to regain control, Ima set a trap for Nonso. If he would not fall willingly, she would push him over the edge. She prepared a feast in her home, inviting him with an air of innocence, as though she were simply a woman wishing to know a man who had intrigued her. Nonso arrived, wary but curious. The room was filled with the scent of roasted goat, plantains, and palm wine. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long, shifting shadows. Ima sat across from him, pouring him a drink with steady hands. "I wish to understand you, Nonso. You intrigue me." He did not touch the drink. "Do you, Ima? Or do you wish to undo me the way you have undone so many others?" She smiled, a slow, dangerous thing. "Perhaps both." Their conversation was a dance, words woven like threads of a dangerous game. She pressed closer, her warmth wrapping around him like a spell. But Nonso did not waver. He did not touch her, did not drink the wine. Instead, he watched her with eyes that saw more than she wanted him to. "You are afraid," he murmured at last. "Afraid that I will not fall, afraid that you might—" Ima's breath caught. This was not how it was supposed to go. She was the one who held power, the one who controlled every moment. But for the first time, she was losing. Nonso stood, his presence towering over her. "The gods are patient, Ima, but they do not wait forever." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the flickering candlelight, her heart hammering in her chest. Ima sat motionless long after Nonso had left, staring at the untouched meal before her. Never before had a man walked away from her, much less with such confidence. It was as if he had read through her like an open book, stripping her bare with his words. "You are afraid." The thought gnawed at her, digging its claws into the very foundation of her existence. The next morning, she did not rise with her usual grace. The silk wrapper she draped around herself felt heavier than before, her golden waist beads suddenly colder against her skin. When she walked through Enugu's busy streets, the usual gasps and murmurs followed, yet they did nothing to ease the storm raging inside her. Whispers of her power still circulated, men and women alike still awestruck by her beauty, but something had changed. She could feel it. It was as though a crack had formed in the world she had so carefully crafted. Desperate for answers, she returned to the priestess, her heart thudding with unspoken fears. "Tell me how to stop this," she demanded, her voice sharper than the night air. "I cannot let him undo me." The priestess, who had always seemed amused by Ima's struggles, now regarded her with something almost resembling pity. "There is nothing I can tell you that you do not already know, child. His power is not magic, it is truth. And truth, Ima, is the one thing even the strongest enchantments cannot withstand." Ima spent the night wandering the city, her mind racing. She tried to think of ways to rid herself of Nonso, of ways to make him submit, but the words of the priestess haunted her. Truth is the one thing even the strongest enchantments cannot withstand. Sleep did not come. Instead, she found herself drawn to the river at the outskirts of the city. The moon reflected on the water's surface, rippling gently as she stepped closer. She knelt, gazing into her own reflection, but all she saw were the ghosts of her past staring back at her. A memory surfaced, one she had buried deep. A time before the waist beads, a time before she had become the woman who devoured men. She had been a girl once, innocent and full of dreams, until hunger had stripped her of innocence. She had begged for food, been turned away, shamed, forgotten. And then the priestess had come, offering salvation in the form of power. But now, for the first time, Ima wondered, had she been saved, or had she been cursed? The river whispered secrets to her, but none gave her peace. She was powerful, yes, but what was power if she no longer understood herself? Nonso had done something no other man had. He had forced her to question, to doubt. And that, she realized, was more dangerous than any magic. Ima remained by the river until the first light of dawn stretched across the sky. The whispers of the past swirled in her mind, tugging at the walls she had carefully built around herself. Her power had never been questioned before, nor had she ever needed to question it. But now, Nonso's words and the priestess's warning gnawed at her resolve like termites at ancient wood. She dragged herself back to the city, exhaustion hanging on her shoulders like a heavy cloth. The streets were already alive with the sounds of traders, women balancing baskets of yams on their heads, and children weaving through the crowds. But for the first time, Ima felt invisible. Her thoughts plagued her, unsettling emotions making her movements uncertain. Was she truly powerful, or merely a puppet to forces beyond her control? Had she ever truly been in command of her fate? As she stepped into her grand home, her reflection in the polished bronze mirror startled her. She looked different. The confidence that once shone in her eyes had dulled. The woman who had once commanded kings now faced a fear she could not name. A sudden knock at her door pulled her from her reverie. It was one of her attendants, her voice trembling. "My lady, there is someone waiting for you at the market. He refuses to leave until he speaks with you." Ima did not need to ask who it was. She already knew. Nonso. Ima stepped into the marketplace, her heart a tight fist in her chest. Nonso stood near a stall selling kola nuts, his gaze locked onto her the moment she approached. He did not smile. He did not bow. He simply watched her, unflinching, as if he had already unraveled every secret she had tried to keep hidden. She stopped a few feet away, lifting her chin. "You have been following me. You claim you are here to free me, but from what? My power? My wealth?" Her voice was sharp, but there was an unsteady edge to it that even she could hear. Nonso's expression remained unreadable. "From yourself, Ima," she scoffed. "You speak as though you know me, but you do not. You are just a man like the rest." "No, Ima. I am the only one who has ever seen you beyond your power, the only one who is not blinded by your enchantment." His words sent a chill down her spine. No man had ever resisted her. No man had ever dared to strip her down to something so raw, so human. "And what if I do not wish to be free?" she challenged. "What if I am content with the life I have built?" Nonso studied her for a long moment, and then, with quiet certainty, he spoke. "Then why do you look afraid?" Ima's breath caught. For the first time she had no answer. Ima's breath wavered as she stood before Nonso, his words echoing in the hollow spaces of her mind. "Then why do you look afraid?" The question clung to her like the morning mist, wrapping around her thoughts, suffocating her carefully built confidence. She had spent years bending men to her will, feeding on their weaknesses, yet here stood one who did not waver. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stand tall. "I am not afraid," she lied, though even she could hear the unsteadiness in her voice. "You think you understand me, Nonso, but you do not. You are just another man who believes he can tame what he does not comprehend." Nonso smiled, but there was no mockery in it, only patience. "I do not seek to tame you, Ima. I seek to show you the truth." The truth. A fragile thing she had buried long ago beneath layers of gold and silk. behind the hypnotic sway of her hips and the whispers of power. The truth was dangerous. It had no place in the world she had built for herself. "Leave me alone," she said at last, turning to walk away. But Nonso's voice stopped her. "I will not, because you are at war with yourself, and soon you will have to choose which side you stand on." Ima did not look back. She could not. But deep inside, she knew. Nonso had already begun to unravel her. The palace was quiet when Ima returned. The attendants greeted her with bowed heads, but she barely acknowledged them. She moved through the lavish halls like a ghost, her thoughts tangled in a web of doubt and defiance. She ran a hand over the beads at her waist, feeling their cool weight against her skin. They had given her everything: wealth, power, the ability to bend men to her will. But now, for the first time, they felt heavy, as though they carried secrets she could no longer ignore. The words of the priestess echoed in her mind. "His power is not magic, it is truth. And truth is the one thing even the strongest enchantments cannot withstand." Could it be true? Had she truly built her life on borrowed power, on illusions that crumbled beneath the weight of truth? She clenched her jaw, shaking the thought away. No. She would not let Nonso's words poison her mind. She had come too far to let doubt undo her. Yet, in the silence of her grand chamber, with only the flickering torches for company, she could not ignore the seed of fear that had been planted in her heart. And worst of all, she did not know how to remove it. Sleep eluded Ima. Shadows danced across the walls of her chamber, whispering fears she had never allowed herself to voice. She had always felt invincible, untouchable, yet now she lay awake, gripped by an unease she could not shake. Nonso's words clung to her like an unrelenting curse. Truth is the one thing even the strongest enchantments cannot withstand. By dawn, she made her way back to the forest, to the one place she swore she would never return in weakness. The priestess sat before her fire, her eyes glinting in the dim morning light. "You returned to me in turmoil, child," she murmured, stirring a pot of thick herbs. "I warned you, his kind is dangerous." Ima crossed her arms over her chest. "Tell me how to stop him. He grows bolder. He does not fear me. He does not desire me. He is unraveling everything I have built." The priestess let out a long, knowing sigh. "Because you were never meant to build anything on borrowed power. What you have taken must be given back, or it will consume you." A chill crawled down Ima's spine. "I cannot undo what I am." The priestess gave her a sharp look. "Then he will be the one to undo you." Ima returned to the city, but it no longer felt like her own. The people still whispered her name, still feared her, but she could feel the shift in the air. Where once there had been unshakable reverence, now there was doubt. Rumors of Nonso had begun to spread, of the man who had defied her, the man who had walked away. She watched from the balcony of her chamber, her gaze sweeping over the city. Enugu had been her hunting ground, her kingdom, but now it felt like a prison closing in around her. And at the heart of it all stood Nonso, the one man she could not bend, the one who carried a truth she could not silence. Summoning her attendants, she issued her command, "Bring him to me, he will not walk away again." Her words were met with hesitation. "My lady," one of the servants began, "what if he does not yield?" Ima's jaw clenched. She could not afford to let her power slip any further. "Then he will learn the consequences of standing against me." But as the sun dipped beyond the horizon and her attendants departed to carry out her bidding, Ima could not ignore the weight pressing down on her chest. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she was walking into a battle she could not win. Nonso did not resist when Ima's attendants arrived to take him. He followed them through the streets of Enugu, his steps steady, his face unreadable. The people watched in silence, their curiosity laced with fear. No man had ever been summoned by Ima and walked away the same. Inside her chamber, Ima stood waiting, draped in silk and adorned with gold, her waist beads gleaming under the torchlight. Yet, despite her commanding presence, there was an unease in her gaze as Nonso was led before her. "You did not fight them," she said, her voice laced with curiosity. "Do you truly believe you are stronger than me?" Nonso met her eyes with a calm that sent a shiver through her. "Strength is not measured by who wields the most power, Ima. It is measured by who can stand when all power is stripped away." Her grip tightened around the golden cup in her hand. "You are a fool. You walk willingly into my trap." Nonso took a step forward. "Then why do you hesitate?" The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Ima had expected defiance, resistance, but this unwavering certainty unsettled her. She had lured men before, had ensnared them with ease, yet with Nonso, the power she had so long relied upon felt like an illusion. She raised her chin. "You will stay here until I decide what to do with you." Nonso simply nodded, as if he had already foreseen her next move. "Then I will wait." Days passed, and Nonso remained in Ima's palace, untouched by fear. She watched him from a distance, studying him, searching for a crack in his armor. Yet he did not waver. He neither begged for mercy nor cowered before her. Instead, he met each day with a quiet patience that unnerved her more than resistance ever could. She tried to seduce him, tried to weave the magic of her presence around him, but it was as though he saw through her illusions. "You hide behind power, Ima, but you do not understand it," he told her one evening, his voice steady as the setting sun cast golden hues across the chamber. "And you think you do?" she snapped, frustration laced in her words. "I know that power does not make one whole. It only disguises what is broken." His words struck a nerve, deeper than she cared to admit. That night, Ima stood before her mirror, tracing the beads at her waist. They had given her everything, yet for the first time she wondered, if she took them off, what would remain of her? For the first time, she did not have an answer. Morning light seeped into Ima's chamber, casting long shadows on the walls. She had not slept. The question that haunted her the night before still lingered, pressing against the edges of her mind. If she took them off, what would remain of her? Nonso had planted doubt in her heart, a doubt she could no longer ignore. She had spent years believing her power was absolute, yet here was a man who stood before her, unshaken, unafraid. It was infuriating. It was terrifying. And in some small, unspoken way, it was freeing. She strode into the great hall where Nonso was held. He was seated on a woven mat, hands resting on his knees, his face calm as ever. "You have spent days here, and yet you have not begged for your freedom," she said, her voice measured. "Do you not fear what I can do to you?" Nonso met her gaze. "Fear is an illusion, Ima, just like the power you wear around your waist." Her fingers instinctively traced the beads. "You speak as if you know my power, as if you understand it." He tilted his head slightly. "I understand that true power does not come from what is given. It comes from what is earned." A flash of anger surged through her, but it was quickly followed by something else, doubt. She had been given her power. She had built her kingdom on magic, on borrowed strength. What had she earned? Without another word, she turned and left the room, her thoughts heavier than they had ever been before. The night air was thick with tension. Ima stood in the courtyard, her hands trembling as she stared at the fire pit in the center. The priestess's warning echoed in her mind. What you have taken must be given back, or it will consume you. She heard footsteps behind her. She did not need to turn to know it was Nonso. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. "I want you to see yourself, Ima, not as the woman with power, not as the woman who has devoured men, but as the woman you were before all of this." She let out a bitter laugh. "That woman died long ago." "No," Nonso said, stepping closer. "She is still here. She is the one questioning everything. She is the one who wonders what would happen if she let go." Ima closed her eyes, gripping the beads tightly. Could she? Could she truly let go of the only thing that had ever made her feel untouchable? A tear slipped down her cheek. She had spent years convincing herself she was invincible, that power was all she needed. But now, standing in the dark with the fire crackling before her, she felt something else entirely. She felt human. Slowly, hesitantly, her fingers unhooked the beads, The weight that had bound her for so long slid away, pooling at her feet. A gust of wind rushed through the courtyard, and Ima gasped, feeling something she had not felt in years: freedom. Nonso watched her, his eyes steady. "Now you can begin again." And for the first time, Ima believed him. The end.